I don't hunt anymore. People ask me why, and I just tell them I got bored of it. That's easier than the truth. The truth makes people look at me differently. Like they're trying to figure out if I'm lying, or worse, like they believe me, and that scares them just as much as it scares me. So I stopped telling it. But it happened. Every single part of it happened. And some nights, when the house is quiet and the wind moves through the trees outside my bedroom window, I hear that sound again. That low, wet breathing sound that doesn't belong to anything I've ever seen in a field guide or a nature documentary. And I pull the blanket up to my chin like I'm 8 years old again, and I remind myself that I am inside. That I am safe. That whatever was out there in those woods is still out there, and I am in here. Most nights, that's enough. Most nights. It was October. Mid-October, I think, because the leaves had already turned but most of them were still on the branches. That burnt orange and deep red kind of color that looks beautiful in the daytime and looks like dried blood at night. I was 26. I'd been hunting white-tailed deer since I was 15, when my uncle first took me out to his property in rural Pennsylvania. I wasn't a trophy hunter. I wasn't obsessed with antlers or scores or any of that. I just liked being outside. I liked the quiet. I liked sitting above the world in a tree stand before sunrise, drinking coffee from a thermos and watching the forest wake up. There was something meditative about it. Something honest. I had my own land by then. Well, not mine exactly. I leased 40 acres from an old farmer named Gerald who didn't use it anymore. His knees had gone bad, and he couldn't walk the terrain. The property was mostly wooded with a small meadow near the center where deer would come to graze in the early morning and just before dusk. I'd hunted it for 2 seasons. I knew every trail, every tree, every strange little hollow where the fog settled on cold mornings. I thought I knew it, anyway. The plan was simple. I was going to do an overnight sit. That means going up into the tree stand in the evening, staying through the night, and hunting the morning movement when deer are most active. It's not comfortable. It's cold, it's boring, and the sleep deprivation gets to you. But serious hunters do it, especially during the rut, that's the breeding season, when bucks are moving at unusual hours, sometimes all through the night. I'd done overnight sits before. Twice, actually, on this same property. Nothing strange had ever happened. I told my girlfriend where I was going. I texted her the property address and told her I'd be back by noon the next day. She told me to be careful and to not forget my hand warmers like I did last time. I loaded my truck and drove the 40 minutes out to Gerald's land, parked at the access road, and hiked in just after 4 in the afternoon. The stand was a hang-on style, bolted to a big white oak about 18 feet up. I'd set it up in September. I had a climbing stick system to get up to it, and I was comfortable in it. I'd sat in that exact stand maybe a dozen times. I got settled in before 5. I had my rifle, a .308 bolt action that I'd owned for years. I had a backpack with food, 2 thermoses of coffee, hand warmers, an extra base layer, a headlamp, and my phone. Service out there was bad, 1 bar, sometimes 2, never reliable, but it was enough to send a text if I needed to. The evening hunt was slow. A few does came through the meadow just before sunset, but I wasn't looking to shoot a doe that year. I watched them. They were calm, ears turning, tails flicking. They didn't sense anything wrong. The sun went down around 6:30. And then the woods went dark. If you've never been in a forest at night, truly in it, not near the edge of it near a parking lot or a campground with lights, then you don't know what real darkness looks like. It is not the darkness of a room with the lights off. In a room, there is always some light. Under a door. Through a curtain. Something. In the woods at night, when there is cloud cover and no moon, the darkness is total. It has weight. It presses against your eyes in a way that makes you feel like you've gone blind. You can hold your hand 6 inches from your face and see nothing. I had a headlamp, and I used it sparingly. Every time I turned it on, I killed my night vision and announced my position to every animal within a quarter mile. So I sat in the dark. I let my eyes adjust. After 20 minutes or so, I could see shapes. The black outline of trees. The slightly lighter gray of the open sky above the meadow. The dark mass of the ground below me. It was quiet. The way the woods are quiet at night, which is not actually silent. There are insects. There are small animals moving through leaves. There is wind, usually, moving through the branches above you. These sounds are normal. You learn them. They become a kind of white noise, a baseline. When something is wrong, the baseline changes. I know that now. Around 9 o'clock, I ate a sandwich and drank some coffee and settled in for the long middle stretch of the night. Nothing was moving. No deer. Nothing large. I could hear an owl somewhere to the northwest, a great horn by the sound of it, doing its low double hoot every few minutes. I remember thinking it was nice. Peaceful. Then the owl stopped. It didn't gradually quiet down. It just stopped, mid-sequence, like something had startled it into silence. Owls don't spook easily. That's something every hunter and birdwatcher knows. They're apex predators of the night. Almost nothing frightens them. I noticed the silence, registered it, and then let it go. Animals get spooked sometimes. It doesn't always mean anything. But the crickets stopped, too. Not all at once. They faded out over about 30 seconds, one section of the forest going quiet, then another, like something was moving through them and silencing each cluster as it passed. And then there was nothing. No insects. No owl. Just the faint sound of the breeze in the high branches. I sat up straighter in the stand. My hand moved to my rifle out of instinct, though I didn't raise it. I just wanted to feel it there. I scanned the meadow. Nothing visible in the dark. I scanned the tree line. Nothing. I waited. For about 10 minutes, the woods were completely silent. And I want you to understand what that means. In October in rural Pennsylvania, the nights are alive with sound. Crickets and katydids are winding down for the season, but they're still present. Field mice are moving. Raccoons. Possums. There is constant low-level biological noise in a healthy forest. When all of that stops at once, something is wrong. Then I heard it. It came from somewhere to the east, which was behind me and slightly to my right. A sound that I still struggle to describe accurately. It was low. Not a growl exactly, but something in that register. Wet, somehow, like it was produced by something with a lot of moisture in its throat. It lasted maybe 4 seconds and then stopped. I turned slowly in my seat, keeping my movements minimal. My heart was moving fast. I was telling myself it was a deer. Deer make strange sounds, especially bucks during the rut. They grunt, they wheeze, they make sounds that can genuinely unsettle you if you're not prepared for them. But I'd heard every deer sound. I had a call in my pack designed to imitate those sounds. What I heard behind me was not a deer. I turned on my headlamp, keeping the beam low and sweeping it toward the east tree line. Nothing. Just trees. Trunks and shadows and the random geometry of branches. I turned the light off and sat in the sudden dark, which felt even heavier than before. My eyes readjusted slowly. The shapes came back. Trees. The meadow. The sky. I picked up my phone and texted my girlfriend. It was 9:22 p.m. Asterisk heard something weird. Probably a buck. Kinda spooked me lol. All good though, asterisk. She was asleep. She didn't respond until morning. I put the phone back in my chest pocket and settled back in. I told myself to relax. I told myself I'd been out here a dozen times and nothing had ever happened. I told myself the woods were just doing what the woods do at night. And for a while, maybe 30 or 40 minutes, things seemed to go back to normal. The crickets came back, gradually. I heard a small animal moving through leaves somewhere below and to my left. My heart rate came down. I drank some more coffee and pulled my wool hat lower over my ears because the temperature had dropped. I think it was around 10:15 when I saw it. It was at the edge of the meadow. I almost missed it because I wasn't looking in exactly the right direction, and because it wasn't moving. But there was a shape there that I was certain hadn't been there before. A dark shape, standing at the far southern edge of where the trees met the grass. Tall. Taller than a deer. My first thought was bear, because bears stand upright sometimes, and a bear on its hind legs is roughly the height and shape of what I was seeing. But bears don't stand still like that. A bear will move, will swing its head, will shift its weight. Whatever I was looking at was absolutely motionless. It was just standing there, at the tree line, roughly 80 yards away, in the dark. I raised my rifle slowly and looked through my scope. I had a decent scope on that gun, a 3-9 power, and I could get a reasonable look in low light. There wasn't much light, but the open sky above the meadow gave enough ambient gray that shapes were visible. What I saw through that scope I have turned over in my mind hundreds of times since, and I still cannot make it fit any category of animal I know. It was tall. Very tall. I'm 6 feet even, and I'm telling you this thing was close to 7 feet in height, maybe more. It was thin, disproportionately thin for its height, with limbs that seemed slightly wrong in their proportions, though the dark made it hard to be certain. It was standing upright. Not like a bear trying to balance. Upright the way a person stands. Weight evenly distributed. Still. It didn't have the outline of a person. I know how that sounds. I know. But the silhouette was wrong. The head was the wrong shape, not dramatically, not in a movie monster way, but subtly, wrong in the way that makes your brain keep trying to correct what it's seeing and failing. Like an image that's been slightly distorted. Close enough to familiar to draw you in, wrong enough to make your stomach clench. I kept the scope on it. It did not move. I sat there for what felt like 5 minutes but was probably 90 seconds, watching this shape through a rifle scope, my finger nowhere near the trigger because I didn't know what I was looking at, and I am not the kind of person who shoots at things he can't identify. Then it turned its head. I don't know how to explain why that was worse than everything else. It just was. The way it turned was slow, deliberate, and it turned until, as best as I could tell, it was facing directly toward me. It had been facing the meadow before. Now it was facing the tree where I was sitting, 18 feet off the ground, in the dark, with no lights on, downwind. It should not have known I was there. I lowered the rifle very slowly. My breath was coming faster than I wanted it to. I made myself inhale through my nose and out through my mouth, slow and controlled. I am not a person who panics easily. I've been in situations, car accidents, a house fire once, a bad interaction with a drunk man outside a bar, where I stayed calm when others didn't. I was not panicking. But I was very, very afraid. I looked at it with naked eyes. Just a shape. Dark, tall, still. I picked up my phone, keeping the screen brightness down as low as possible. I opened the flashlight app and held my thumb over it, not activating it yet. I wanted it ready. I waited. For approximately 10 more minutes, that shape stood at the tree line and did not move. And then, without any sound I could detect, it was gone. I didn't see it leave. It was there, and then it wasn't. The tree line was empty. I swept my headlamp across the southern edge of the meadow. Empty. I checked my phone. 10:31 p.m. I want to be honest about what I did next, because I think it says something about how frightened I actually was without fully admitting it to myself. I did not come down from the tree stand. I told myself this was because coming down in the dark when there might be a large unknown animal in the area would be the dangerous choice. I told myself that I was safer 18 feet up than I would be on the ground, moving through dark woods to my truck. I told myself these things, and they were all true, and they were also a way of not admitting that I was too afraid to move. I had my back against the tree now. I had turned my body so that I could see as much of the area as possible. I had my rifle across my lap with the safety on. I had my headlamp in my hand. The woods were quiet again. Not the wrong kind of quiet from before, but close to it. I started going through explanations. I'm someone who believes in evidence. I don't believe in supernatural things. I wanted a rational answer, and I worked through every possibility I could think of. A person. Someone walking the property at night. A poacher, maybe, or a hiker who'd gotten off trail. The height seemed wrong for a normal person, but in the dark, at 80 yards, dimensions are hard to judge. It was possible. A bear. Standing upright. Looking in my direction by chance. The strange shape of the head could be distortion in the dark, or the angle of the animal's posture. A trick of the light and shadow. A cluster of branches or brush at the tree line that I'd misread as a figure. It's called pareidolia, the tendency of the human brain to find shapes, especially figures and faces, in random visual data. Hunters experience it regularly. I went through these explanations like a checklist. I found comfort in them. I almost convinced myself. Then, from directly below me, something exhaled. It was close. Directly below the oak tree. 18 feet below me, approximately. Not the sound of a deer blowing, that sharp, loud snort that deer make when they're alarmed. Not any animal sound I recognized. It was slow. Drawn out. Like a long, controlled breath being released through something, not lungs exactly, or lungs shaped differently than lungs should be shaped. There was that wetness again, that quality I'd heard earlier from the east. Like there was too much fluid involved in the process of breathing. I did not look down immediately. I sat absolutely still for a full minute, maybe longer. My body had gone into a kind of locked state. I was aware of every sensation, the cold on my face, the hard metal of the rifle across my legs, the way my heart was hitting my chest wall like it was trying to get out. Then I turned on my headlamp and looked down. There was nothing there. The ground below the tree was empty. Leaves and roots and bare dirt. Nothing. I swept the light in a slow circle around the base of the tree. Nothing. I pushed the beam out further, into the surrounding woods. Trees. Shadows. Nothing moving. I turned the light off. Sitting in the dark again, I became aware of something that I can only describe as a feeling of being looked at. I know that sounds vague. I know it's not evidence of anything. But every human being has felt it at some point. You're in a public place, and the back of your neck goes warm, and you turn around, and someone is looking directly at you. There's a reason we can feel that. It's an old part of the brain. An ancient system. That system was screaming. I texted my girlfriend, "Are you awake?" No response. She was asleep. I texted my brother, "Hey man, you up?" He responded 4 minutes later, "Yeah, what's up?" I started typing. I wrote 3 different versions of what I wanted to say, and I deleted all of them because they sounded insane. Finally I sent, "I'm out hunting and I heard something weird under my stand. Kind of freaked out, *." He sent back, "animal probably. You have your gun, *." Yeah. *, then you're fine. Big scary hunter scared of a raccoon lol *. I didn't respond. I put the phone away. He wasn't wrong that I had my gun. But the gun felt less reassuring than it should have. The gun worked on things you could see. On things that had a body that worked the way bodies work. I didn't know that whatever was out there had either of those qualities. The next 3 hours were the worst of my life. Not because anything dramatic happened. That's what I need you to understand. There was no attack. There was no chase. There was just the dark, and the cold, and the sounds. They came from different directions. Sometimes from below. Sometimes from the east or the north. Always that same slow, wet exhalation. Sometimes something that might have been footsteps in the leaves, a soft, deliberate pressure, not the random crunch of an animal passing through, but something moving with intention, stopping, moving again. Once, for about 2 minutes, I heard a sound that I can only describe as breathing directly level with me. 18 feet off the ground. In a position where nothing should have been able to breathe because there was nothing there, no branch large enough, no structure of any kind, just open air and darkness. I did not turn on my light for that one. I sat in the absolute dark and I listened to something breathe at my level, in empty air, 8 or 10 feet away from me, for 2 minutes. And then it stopped. I cried at some point. I'm not ashamed of that. I was sitting in a tree stand, in total darkness, with something circling me that I could not see and could not identify, and I was exhausted and cold and alone and profoundly, deeply frightened. The crying was quiet and brief, and then I stopped because I didn't want to make noise. Around 2 in the morning, I made a decision. I was going to wait for first light. The moment I had enough gray in the sky to navigate by, I was going down and I was leaving. Hunting season be damned. The overnight sit be damned. I was going to climb down, walk fast to my truck, and drive away. That gave me about 4 hours to wait. I spent them as still and quiet as I could manage. The sounds came and went. I catalogued them without responding to them. I made myself think about other things, upcoming football games, a project at my job, a trip my girlfriend and I were planning for Thanksgiving. I counted my breaths. I watched the sky above the meadow for any change in the darkness. Around 4, I thought I heard something else. This was different from the breathing sounds, and it only happened once. It was a voice. Or, not a voice. Not speech. But something in the tonal register of a human voice, produced in a way that no human throat produces sound. Low and irregular, rising and falling without pattern, like someone had recorded a person speaking and played it back distorted and slowed down to the point where all the meaning was lost, leaving only the raw sound of a voice. It lasted maybe 10 seconds, coming from the north, and then it stopped. I did not move. I did not breathe for a long moment. And then the crickets started again, slowly, the way they had come back before. And an owl called somewhere, not the same owl maybe, further away. And gradually, over the next 20 minutes, the forest sounds rebuilt themselves into something like normal. And the feeling of being watched, that screaming ancient thing in the back of my brain, slowly quieted. Whatever had been out there was gone. I don't know when it left. I don't know what it was doing during all those hours while it circled and breathed and moved in the dark below and around me. I don't know what it wanted, if wanting is even a concept that applies to it. I just know that at some point between 4 and 5 in the morning, I was alone again. Dawn came slowly. The sky above the meadow went from black to deep blue to gray, and when I had enough light to see the ground clearly, I climbed down from the stand. I moved fast. I unclipped my harness, got to the lowest climbing stick, and dropped the remaining few feet to the ground. My legs were stiff from the cold and the hours of sitting, and I stumbled slightly on landing. I looked at the ground around the base of the oak tree. I found the tracks almost immediately. They were in a patch of soft dirt just east of the tree, where a small drainage channel kept the soil damp. Partial impressions, not complete prints. But enough. They were large. Significantly larger than a human footprint. I wear a size 12 shoe, and these impressions were longer than my boot by several inches. The shape was wrong for a human foot, but wrong in a way that was hard to articulate, close enough to bilateral, close enough to a recognizable structure, but off. There were no claw marks. Whatever made them, the toes or toe analogs were flat against the ground. The stride pattern, what I could reconstruct of it, was bipedal. I took 3 photos on my phone and then I walked out of those woods as quickly as I could without running. I'm not sure why I didn't run. Pride, maybe. Or the superstitious feeling that running would make me pray in a way that walking did not. I reached my truck. I put my rifle in the back. I got in and locked the doors and sat there for a minute with the engine running. Then I drove home. I showed the photos to exactly 2 people. My brother, who looked at them for a long time and then said they were probably made by a raccoon moving in a weird pattern through soft mud. And a guy from my hunting club who I trusted, an older man who'd been hunting those hills for decades. He looked at them for a long time without saying anything. Then he looked at me. He asked me exactly where I'd been hunting. I told him. The 40 acres off County Road 9, Gerald Halpin's old property. He was quiet for a moment. Then he handed my phone back and told me I should find somewhere else to hunt. I asked him why. He said there had been stories about that area for a long time. Not recent stories. Old ones. He'd heard them when he was young from men who'd hunted that area before Gerald owned it. He said he didn't know what the stories meant or whether they were true. He said he'd always stayed away from that property himself, and that he'd never wanted to explain why because it made him sound like he was scared of ghost stories. I asked him what the stories said. He was quiet again, looking out the window. Then he said, asterisk, they said something lives in there. Not visits. Lives, asterisk. I didn't ask anything else. I drove out to Gerald's place 2 weeks later. Not to hunt. I went to tell him I was ending the lease early and to ask him about the property's history. Gerald was a quiet man in his late 70s. Arthritic hands, sharp eyes. He made me coffee and we sat at his kitchen table and I told him I had had a strange experience out there, and I described it without exaggerating. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he sat with it for a moment. Then he asked me which stand I'd been in. I told him, the white oak, on the east edge of the meadow. He nodded slowly. He told me his father, who'd owned that land before him, had a rule. You could hunt anywhere on the property except within 200 yards of that oak tree. Gerald had always thought it was just his father being territorial about a favorite spot. He'd never asked for a reason. I asked if his father had ever said anything about the property that struck him as strange. Gerald looked at his coffee. Then he told me one thing. He said when he was a child, maybe 9 or 10, he'd gone out to the property with his father one morning to check the deer feeders. Early morning, still dark. And when they pulled up to the access road, his father had put the truck in park and sat there for a long moment, looking into the dark tree line. Gerald had asked what he was looking at. His father said, just counting. Gerald had asked what he was counting. And his father said, making sure there's only one of them out there tonight. Gerald said he never understood what that meant. He'd assumed it was something his father said, a private habit, a hunter's superstition. I drove home trying very hard not to think about what it implied. Making sure there's only one. I don't hunt anymore. I sold my tree stand the following spring. I still have my rifle because I grew up with guns and I'm not afraid of them, but I haven't taken it out of the case in 2 years. I drove past County Road 9 once, about a year after that night. I don't know why. The access road to Gerald's property was visible from the highway, just a gap in the tree line, a dirt track leading back into the woods. I slowed down. There was something at the edge of the tree line. I want to say it was a deer. I want to say that with confidence, but the truth is that the shape was wrong, and it was standing at the edge of the shadows in a way that was too still to be natural, and when my car passed, I felt that feeling again, that ancient, screaming thing in the back of the skull, and I pressed the accelerator down and I did not look in the rearview mirror. I have not gone back. The photos are still on my phone. 3 photos, taken at dawn in poor light, of impressions in soft mud that don't match anything in any track identification guide I've found. I look at them sometimes. I keep trying to find an explanation that satisfies me. I keep trying to close the door on it completely, to file it away as an unusual experience with a rational cause that I simply couldn't identify at the time. I almost manage it, sometimes. And then the wind moves through the trees outside my window, and the sound is a little wrong, a little too wet, a little too slow, like something breathing at the edge of the yard, and I lie there in the dark and I think about Gerald's father sitting in that truck in the early morning, looking at the tree line, counting. Making sure there's only one of them out there tonight. I used to find that phrase frightening because of what it implied about the creature. Now I find it frightening for a different reason. It implies his father already knew what to do if there was more than one. And nobody ever told me what that was.